Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Weight Neutral Nutrition Podcast. I am your host, Devin Dirksen, and I'm super excited to have you with us today. I am here with my guest, Jane, and she is going to be talking to us about culture, intuitive eating, how food plays into culture, how family dynamics can affect, your relationship with food and your recovery, and mental health. So we have a lot to talk about today, but I just want to introduce her first so that we kind of know who she is, a little bit about her. She is a licensed mental health counselor and has been for 13 years. She uses EMDR and IFS therapy to help clients work through trauma and family of origin issues. She recently ventured into the coaching world so she can help women achieve a peaceful relationship with their weight and body so that they can fully love themselves again without yo-yo dieting and excessive exercise. So welcome, Jane, to the show. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about how you got into this work? I kind of gave like the big picture stuff, but let us have it.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a little bit nervous, to be honest with you, and excited at the same time. Thank you for the great introductions. So I've been in the mental health world for a long time, and personally, I've been doing this disorder eating for, I realize it's more than a quarter of a century. And when you asked me like to introduce myself, I was like, oh my gosh, how long do you have like for me to tell you 25 years of disorder eating? So I definitely could relate to the struggles. And that's why I want to be in this profession to help people to not have to struggle for this long.
Totally. And so let's just like dive right into it, I guess.
Sure.
And you're from originally from Taiwan, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So do you find that food and relationship to food and things like that are different where you grew up versus like how you work with clients now, or how does that look like for you?
I think there's a lot of similarities, to be honest with you, because my parents and my grandparents' generation grew up very, very poor. So for them to have food, it's also a way to show love, to know that, oh, we have some stability. And yet, because the diet culture is so sneaking, and I think that playing to their subconscious of like, okay, we have to have a daughter in a perfect shape in order to save face to be presentable. Like means that we're taking good care of her. So it's a very conflicted message of like, on the one hand, you see your parents want to feed you all the time to show you that they love you. They wouldn't ask you, how are you? They would usually ask like, did you eat yet?
Mhm.
And on the other hand, it's like they want to restrict your eating. They want to make sure you eat good, you lose weight or keep skinny. So it's a very conflicted messages there. And I see a lot of clients can relate. It's like, okay, I go to Christmas, I go to Thanksgiving. That's my culture. I want to use food to connect with my family. And yet at the same time, they have the expectation, and the society have this expectation on me that I have to keep my size in a certain way. And that's how the biggest things I'm seeing. It's like the internal battle with this kind of mismessagings.
hmm Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of my clients can relate as well. I think
Yeah.
that there's this idea that diet culture is like out there, right? It's the media and it's like magazines and, influencers on the internet. But I think that a lot of the actual messages that we receive around dieting and weight loss and like the perfect body comes from people in our family. And that can be really well, it can be a positive thing if they're positive messages, but it's often not the case, right? It's often these negative messages around trying to stay
Yeah.
thin and trying to
Yeah.
control what
Yeah.
you look like and stuff.
And I found that's most of my clients struggle with. It's like they can deal with the diet culture, right? But it's the person that they love the most. Like we're talking about their mom, their dad, their partner, when they are sending very hurtful messages, maybe even unintentionally, but it's chronic. We're talking about decades of hearing these messages. It can be so hurtful to overcome.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's like a really unexplored part of the messaging around anti-diet culture and the messaging around eating disorder recovery even, right? Like that's who you work with. And I think that we don't talk about enough how family and how culture plays into those mindsets, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. When I was preparing for this, I kind of think about some tips and tricks. Do you mind if I share some?
for sure. Go for it.
Yeah, yeah. So, one thing is that when you realize that a lot of this is your families that they inherited from these messages from the society and it's their own work, you will have less burdens. Because I think a lot of the time people feel like, oh, I need to fix my family. I need to change their
Mm.
minds. I need them to respect me and talk to me in a better way. And that's just a lot of stress and burdens and responsibilities they put on themselves. I'm not saying that your family or friends will not change, but when we talk about stages of change, they might not even have the awareness that they need to change. And sometimes it's like we need to trust the process of when you heal yourself, you eventually will be radiant and carry that aura around you that it make an impact on them. And maybe then they will have the awareness and to trust them that it's their homework that they need to work on this process, their journey on their own of having awareness, having changing their internal process and dialogue to eventually be able to support us in recovery better. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's a really good point actually, because you can't control what other people think and what other
Exactly.
people are doing. And so if you can actively let go of what you said burden of that, or make it their burden kind of thing, I think that that is really helpful. Because I think that even on a lesser extent, even if it's just your friends, even if
Yeah.
it's like the girls you go out for drinks with and you're trying
Yeah.
to tell them like, well, I love my body now and everybody else should do it too. And it just like, it becomes like kind of an uphill battle.
Yeah. Do you feel like sometimes like they're still in a diet culture cult and we're out of the cult? And it's like, okay, how do I persuade them to get out of it? But
Yeah, totally. That I think that is very true. And I think that like you said, once you do the healing work, like you kind of have to do it yourself and try to lead the way for other people. You can't force them to come along with you.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Another thing that I did with myself and with my clients is I have them list down like a genogram, like what their immediate family, their parents, and their grandparents. And after that, they have to list down like each individual's positive traits and not so likable traits. The reason when you do that, when you look through that, is throughout history, you'll see like your generation go through like the World War II and like even in the 50s and the 60s and then to the big economic break in the 80s, you will see like how they try to survive each big crisis. And that's why they carry those traits with them. So even the not so likable traits is their resiliency. And then somehow they influence you, they give those gifts to you. So you also have the likable traits and the resiliency traits. And when you see that and when you see how they're reacting, you will have more compassion now of I appreciate how my family survived those things, even though I don't like the certain way they're acting, but I'm glad that they give me those strengths so I can use those strengths in my recovery.
That's a really, I think, powerful exercise,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes if people are examining these things, and I
Yeah.
know I think about one client in particular, she had a really hard time accepting, that her family member had done this to her essentially. And so I think that that's a really good way for people to start and to see like, obviously these people care about you, but they did have traumas themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's all really helpful. Like I really love that tip that you gave about the families. Because you work like with people who have like full on like clinical eating disorders, is that right? More so?
In my coaching world, no. In my
Okay.
coaching world, I work with more people who fell through the crack with the DSM diagnosis, right? I
Okay.
think that's the majority of the women out there is like they are chronically dieting or doing a lot of excessive exercising. They don't even know that they're gradually develop disorder eating and maybe eventually lead to eating disorder. And yet they don't meet the diagnosis of DSM eating disorder. So they are not getting the help they need. And it's sad. I think it's even scary that when they are Googling and searching, like, how do I get motivation back? How do I succeed and maintain the next diet? They ended up um, working with coaches or trainers who continue to trap them in the diet culture and do more harmful things to their bodies. So I think that's why I want to step out and say, hey, no, no, no. Like there's a way that we can intervene now. You don't have to continue to harm yourself and harm your body. I don't know
Mhm.
if you can relate to that.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I think that's a really good point, I think, to bring up here because, well, first of all, I think that the general public doesn't recognize that eating disorders are like a psychiatric diagnosis, right? I think
Mhm.
that, like, I know that, and like I think obvious, like it's pretty obvious to those who like work with those people, but like if someone is struggling with like the more disordered eating, I think that it's really common for people to say, well, I haven't been diagnosed, so I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
And
And
what would you say to those people? Do you have anything to say about that?
that's a very good question. Um, I would say like how is that affecting your life? Like if you examine it, if you're constantly thinking about food, planning for food, if you are arranging a daily schedule according to when you can exercise, if you are planning your going out with your friends or family, like before you can have exercise or after that, when you can go to the gym to burn the calories, then you are really consumes, your life is being consumed by this. And when you start with that and you realize that I don't want to be tied in with food and exercise and body image issues in my entire life, then that's when you can just go out and start exploring what else is out there. You don't even have to like really go into therapy or coaching, but just start like reading and listening to Devin's podcast, right? To start that awareness process. And there's changes and there's a lot of hope and there's a different way of life out there.
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. I just wanted to like segue there for a second because I think that it's like you said, I feel like a lot of people have fallen through the cracks and
Mm,
they haven't, they're kind of in this limbo where they don't feel like, oh, I need to get therapy or I need to do this, but like something needs to change before it gets worse, right?
right, right.
So
Yeah.
awesome. So I appreciate you talking about that. I know I kind of put you on the spot about that one. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Uh,
Um, I
cool.
appreciate
So
that question.
yeah, I think, and I had like, if people want to go back as well, if you're listening to the podcast, like if you want to go back and listen to the episode I did with Caroline Green, you can also find, like, we talk a little bit about that as well, because
Oh,
she
that's
works with
great.
people who have eating disorders more like, and we do talk briefly about the difference between intuitive eat or sorry, between disordered eating and like a full-on eating disorder. So I found that episode actually really enlightening, like just from my
Yeah,
own
yeah,
perspective. But yeah, if listeners are listening, you can go back and check that one out as well.
great.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about intuitive eating from a mental health perspective. Is that like, that's kind of your specialty, right? Like you, I mean, you're obviously a mental health practitioner. How does the world of mental health kind of play into this rejection of diet culture and people trying to heal their relationship with food?
I think intuitive eating is a great way of healing our mental health. I say this because how we talk to ourselves, the narrative we put in ourselves on a daily basis eventually plays out in our life. If you constantly bully yourself internally, um, your life movie, it's gonna be a bullying movie. And I think learning about intuitive eating is you really start to examine what else is out there, like what kind of messages can I say to myself differently. And the first is by examining how the diet culture influence how you talk to yourself and how you think to yourself. And that's in the intuitive eating training too, right? How do you reframe certain thinking? So eventually you get to create your own narrative in your own way so you can really live an authentic life. Another thing I think I love this about intuitive eating is not a lot of people talk about is the grieving process. A lot of people have this fantasy and have this dream of my life will be better once I've reached a certain size.
Mhm.
And they feel like if they embrace intuitive eating, they can never reach that dream. And that's if they hold on to that dream for decades. And that's a big gap in how they need to grieve. And that's when mental health can step in and help you and kind of hold you with compassion that it's like you are okay with the way you are. It's still okay to have that fantasy and it can coexist with recovery.
Mm. I think that's a really important point as well. Um, because yeah, I think there has to be that coexisting or that grieving of like this isn't the way anymore. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because actually somebody yesterday was in my DMs on Instagram, and this was just like kind of a total stranger. Like she follows me, but I don't know this person. And they had said to me something about they are a dancer,
Mhm.
and so they feel like they have this like big struggle with weight. They need to lose weight to fit the look of the dancer, and but it's coming at the expense of their health and their like mental well-being. And I said to them like, well, do you think that like that's okay? And they just kind of didn't respond. So I was like, well, I mean, you came into my DMs, but it's true, right? Like it is a really, really hard thing, I think, for a lot of people to
Yeah.
let go of that dream.
Right. But I can relate to that because it's so funny. I also have a model DM me because they are in this world, they have to look a certain way. That's their job.
Hmm.
And yet it's like you have to think about how much it costs your life.
Hmm.
It consumes you, like your energy, your obsessions, right? And
Hmm.
even cost you depression and anxiety just because you want to keep in a certain shape. And at some point, you're going to realize that is this really worth it.
Hmm. Yeah. And not just like from a mental perspective, but like, what is that doing to your physical body?
Right.
And I don't think like we don't like to talk about that because I feel like weight loss is seen as like the ultimate goal all the time. But like weight cycling is not good for you. And,
Exactly.
chronically being undernourished is not good for you. And like,
It's not
oh,
sustainable.
no, not at all. And it's like, it's really hard for your body to be like underfueled all the time.
Right.
Like
Right.
you feel weak, you feel sluggish, you feel like your digestion slows down, right? If you're not eating enough. So it's
Right. And then you can't heal from the mental health side if you don't have the nutrition and the energy.
yes, that
It's all
is.
related.
And so yeah, I think like it's hard for me to think about, like you said, the model or these dance people who are in like because that's their job, like you said.
Right.
And so I don't know how one reconciles that. I feel like people in those positions have tough choices to make, but it is their life and it's their choice. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that the culture is shifting, that we're
Mhm.
seeing like there are dance companies and even model companies being able to embrace all different sizes because that's reflecting of the general public, right? We all do come in different sizes and shapes.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. I think so too, but I hope that that's
Yeah.
continues on.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Awesome. So did you have anything else to add about like the family dynamics and how they play into like recovery and people's like healing of their relationship with food? I'd love to hear more about that because I think that could be really powerful for people if you have more to add.
Yeah, yeah. How I do this, I incorporate with the IFS therapy, the internal family system. The theory is that it's kind of like the sun. The sun is always there, and you have that energy within you that can provide you with unconditional positive regards and compassion and companionship and calm, all the good essence. However, throughout life, we have to develop all these different parts in order to survive. I think a lot of your listeners can relate that we all have a manager part that can get us to count calories, count macros, do exercise in the daytime. And then sometimes in the evening, you will have like a effort mode or a firefighter's mode come up. It's like, no, we can't do this anymore. We gotta give up. So by understanding how all your parts are helping you can really help in the recovery process. And with what that turns into, once you understand your parts and how you work, you will have a better understanding of dealing with your family dynamics because you will see that your families, whoever you're dealing with, are coming from their also maybe their hurtful part, their inner child part, and needs that never being met, or the criticizing part. Then you will know that you are just dealing with that part. Then you wouldn't feel like that. That's that whole person you're dealing with. And the same with you, you'll feel more empowerment. Like I am not just the control freak with my food and exercise, or I'm not just the one who give up all the time. There's more to me. There's more power to me. Come to that.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's super helpful, I think, is looking at it that way because I don't know, like family stuff is so tough, I think. I think it gets really, really hard for people. Like I think, if healing were to take place in a vacuum of only you and you don't have to talk to anyone and,
Yeah, that'll
all
be so
that,
much easier.
that would be totally great. But then, yeah, like how do you approach like a family meal or how do you approach like family members kind of taking, like or sorry, like making comments about your body or your food or anything like that. So I think that
Yeah,
people probably like if people are listening to this podcast, they probably have tools around those like surface level, conversations. But I think that when you are healing, like it's kind of that inner thing, right? Like I
right.
don't know. I feel like what a lot of what I've seen is a lot of anger towards family members who have
Yeah,
who have
yeah,
given you the trauma basically. But we kind of talked about that already, but I just think it's so interesting to me because I
yeah.
just think it's nice the way you approach it.
The I tell my clients that your anger part can be at home or be at Disneyland. Like they don't have to engage with this family members, and you can work with a coach, with a therapist to heal this angry part. I think sometimes that give clients some release of, oh, okay, the adult me, the adult self, the rational part that go to school, go to work, that part can deal with my family members, and I can leave the angry part at home or the hurtful part of me, the inner child, at home.
Mhm.
And I also have another, maybe like you said, the service level. It's like, imagine you're going and dealing with your family as if you're watching a movie. And when you're watching from third person perspectives, you might get some more insight, sometimes more you can see the sarcastic part and like you can joke about it more because you are not engaged with it anymore. You're just like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. I can't believe they're still saying that, they're dealing still dealing with that. And like I don't have to be engaged. I can just like take my popcorn here,
Right.
cookies, and just watch them deal with their own stuff or say whatever they want to say.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. And it's like you said, right? You can't change what they're thinking or what they're saying, but you could change the way that you react to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for all of that. Is there anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, no.
Cool. So last question I ask every single guest on the show. What is one thing you would tell your 18-year-old self about life or health or food or anything at all?
Yeah. I want to do it in a way that I won't change any history. So I wouldn't reveal anything. I would just tell her that you're gonna struggle and you're the future, you're gonna thank you for all the struggle because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be who I am without all those struggles and all those experiences. I want to thank her for that. I know even though it's hard, but I want to let her know it's gonna get better. It's gonna be okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for all of that. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us and all of those good tips and tricks as well.
Thank
So
you
where
so
can
much for
people,
having me.
yeah, no worries at all. Where can people find you and connect with you more?
I have a website. It's called www.janeliurocks.com. I swear I'm not a narcissistic. I just think Jane Liu consulting and coaching is too long. And for my Instagram, if you just type in Jane Liu coaching, you'll be able to find me.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jane. I hope people find you there. We will put your information in the show notes and in the YouTube description as well. People can scroll down and connect with you. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I
Thank you
hope you
so
have a
much
great
for
day.
having me. You too. Bye bye.